And supermarkets, banks, gas and coal giants, some of our country's richest companies, are today in the firing line after the Greens outlined their bold election pitch: tax the rich, fund the poor. Does that sound familiar?
Casting himself as Australia's very own Robin Hood.
We're talking about those corporations that are making excessive profits, obscene profits, windfall profits.
The pitch? Slugging big corporations a 40% tax on profits after the first $100 million of turnover.
When you make these big whacking great profits, do what other countries do and say you've got to give a bit of it back to the public, because that's who you're making the money off.
Among those in the firing line, the big four banks.
In 6 months, Commonwealth Bank made $5 billion in profit.
Telcos.
Telstra posted an annual profit of $1.79 billion.
And the supermarkets.
Coles today had announced a profit of more than $1 billion.
They should definitely be paying a bigger chunk.
We should be benefiting from that. Why would you not help the community?
And Adam Bandt and his merry men aren't stopping there. The Greens also want to slap a 40% tax on super profits in the coal and mining industry and close tax loopholes in the oil and gas sector.
Gas corporations are parasitic leeches. They get the gas for free and then they make billions of dollars profit and they send it offshore tax-free.
That trio of taxes, according to parliamentary modelling, would raise $514 billion over the next decade. And that cash will be redirected to households.
To fund services that will make people's lives better, to address the cost of living.
We're struggling to live. Yeah, while they're making big money.
There's nothing about Greens' economic policy which is realistic, and they have the luxury as a party that has never governed and never will to say whatever they like.
Let's not forget that thinking that taxes on big corporations is about other people. It is about the superannuation and savings of ordinary Australians, which would collapse.
Let's not forget they're employing tens of thousands of people.
Big businesses are putting a lot of money back into the economy as it is.
I don't think, that's fair on those businesses.
The Greens hope that they'll be able to gain, then wield the balance of power in the next parliament to get their Robin Hood reforms over the line.
Labor is going to have to learn to play well with others.
The Labor Party is not about doing deals with the Greens.
Politicians like Adam Bandt may like to see themselves as Robin Hood, but this movie has been played out again and again. They go from being Robin Hood to being the Sheriff of Nottingham, and it ends in a disaster.
Greens leader Adam Bandt is with us now. Adam, how are you going to stop companies passing this extra cost on to consumers?
Well, it's about time that these big corporations paid their fair share of tax. We want to also legislate to make price gouging illegal and stop things like rents from soaring to make sure that they can't pass it on. But at the moment in our country, 1 in 3 big corporations pays no tax at all. And when a nurse pays more tax than a multinational, something is deeply wrong. So we're saying we're going to make these big corporations that are making excessive obscene profits pay their fair share of tax and use that money to make people's lives better by doing things like getting dental into Medicare.
Would you consider something like price caps then for certain products?
That's certainly something that we'll be looking at, making price gouging illegal, and things like price caps on rents and freezing rents and then putting caps on how much they can rise after that is certainly something we need to do. For things like power bills, look, we should get back to treating it as an essential service rather than an opportunity for big corporations to make massive, massive profits. This is really about what kind of country we want to live in and what's the role of government. Is it just to let the big corporations put up prices as much as they want and pass the pain on to everyday people? Or is it about saying these big corporations making billions in profits need to pay their fair share of tax and we'll use that to make people's lives better?
You're applying this to everything. Every company that has $100 million in turnover would have to pay this higher tax rate. Let's say we're talking about, JB Hi-Fi. It's an organisation that sells electronic goods. It's overwhelmingly discretionary stuff. This is not stuff that people have to buy. They can set the price wherever the market will accept it. Why should you get to control how much profit a company like that's private, that's not using any of our public resources, and that is simply selling to a market a bunch of discretionary goods, why should you control how much profit they get to make?
Well, have a look at what happens with personal income tax. If you earn a higher rate of tax, get a higher rate of income and you earn more, then you're expected to pay a higher rate of tax. And that's because when you get into the stage of being like very, very wealthy, then you can contribute a bit more to the things that we all need. We're saying the same should apply to corporations.
But these are different. The comparison doesn't quite work because an individual who's getting a whole lot of money, they don't necessarily employ people. Businesses do. And so when they get money, they're returning money to shareholders, they're potentially expanding and so on. But even so, as I understand it, your plan doesn't apply to profits. It applies to companies that have $100 million in turnover.
No, it applies to profits.
So only profits?
It applies to profits after you make $100 million. So in turnover.
So after you make right, but that's the point. You can make $100 million in turnover.
Yeah, and it applies above that. So we're not talking about small businesses.
You can have $100 million in turnover but make a very little profit. And you're going to tax them at a higher rate as though they're the billionaires of the company ecosystem.
No, it's not quite right. It's about looking at the size of the company, the overall size of the company, and then saying on the basis of that, you're allowed to make a reasonable rate of return. It's not about taxing ordinary profits. It's about saying once you go above that, depending on the size of your company, once you go above that, if you're making these obscene profits that in many instances have nothing to do with the nature of the product that you're selling. For example, when Vladimir Putin decided to invade the Ukraine, the price of gas went through the roof.
Yeah, okay.
Gas corporations made massive
windfall profits. You're talking about resources
there.
I'm trying to broaden this out. Hypothetical. I have a company. It takes $150 million in turnover, but it costs a hell of a lot to run. And so in the end, I make a $2 million profit as a company that employs hundreds of people. Am I paying your higher tax?
Well, it depends on the size of the company. If the size of the company means that you're getting sort of a below 5% return on profit from that, then no, you wouldn't pay it.
Okay.
It's those companies that are making those big stratospheric profits, like the banks, like the big supermarkets, like those big tech companies that are making it off the back of people's pain. And look,
so I get to make a 5% profit.
Yeah, that's right. 5% plus the long-term bond rate to get technical. So it's saying that 5% on top of the size of your company, that's a fair return. When you start going over and above that, it's time to give some back.
Adam Bandt, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much.